Good afternoon. My name is Chris Ganetsky, and I'm the group publisher here at Business Publications Corporation. Welcome to our third and final think tank in our Envision Iowa series. Before we begin today, we are in meeting style, which means you can be seen. If you'd like to be off camera, you may choose to do that as well during the program portion of our event. But later on, we'll ask you to be on camera during the interactive portion of the program. Envision Iowa is an initiative created by BPC in 2021 to help Iowa thrive and grow. In 2020, in the midst of the pandemic, we asked ourselves how we as a media company can help Iowa's economic recovery and future. As we often do, we asked and we listened to our experts. We conducted a series of focus groups, and it ultimately led us to identify a few key themes and needs among statewide leaders. The desire for a forum on and to have discussions on economic challenges and opportunities here in Iowa. And out of that, we created and launched Envision Iowa. Ultimately, the goal of Envision Iowa is to strengthen Iowa's businesses and communities through strategic connections, powerful storytelling, and amplifying the message of Iowa, which we believe can help lead to collaboration and action. And we've seen that through this process. Envision Iowa has three components. Our first is the think tanks. This is the third and final, as we mentioned. The public event is going to be on October 22nd, where we're going to get together again to be able to amplify the discussion, the topics that we've touched on during the think tanks, and also really dig into the Envision Iowa Statewide Leaders Economic Sentiment Survey, which we're doing in partnership with local consulting firm Baton Global. The public event is going to be held from 4 to 6 p.m. here in Des Moines. It's being sponsored by the Iowa Economic Development Authority, the Iowa Business Council, Des Moines International Airport, and the Iowa Credit Union League. Corporate tables are now available for that. So if you're interested in getting a look at that data and being a part of the room, part of that discussion about where we need to be going as a state, we hope you'll join us at that. We'll put a link here in the chat where you can learn more about how to get a table for that event. And then lastly, one of the big goals of this initiative is to make sure that we're covering and infusing statewide economic development coverage into all of our products. We view ourselves as an economic development organization that uses information and storytelling to provide the tool of information and news for businesses and the community so that they can leverage that information to help them do business better. This series is going to help us do that by, we'll highlight our stories within our print product, within our e-newsletters, video, and of course the events as well. So here's a little bit of an overview on how today is going to work. It's going to be a little bit of interactive. We're going to be pretty fast moving so we can get through a number of things today. So you get to do a little bit of learning, a little bit of interacting. So we're going to start things off with a keynote. Today is with Simpson College President Jay Byers. We're going to give you a little bit of a sneak peek at some of that data. Wade Britt is here with us again today. He's the managing director and partner at Baton Global. He's going to give us a little bit of a look at some of the data that pertains to today's topic of infrastructure. After hearing from Wade, we've got a panel discussion with a great group that will dive into talking about infrastructure needs in the state. And then we're going to go into some breakout sessions. That's the part where a lot of folks get a little nervous about meeting new people, but I promise you it's one of the best parts of this. You get a chance to interact for about 10-15 minutes or so with a small group of folks from across the state. You may meet a few people and talk a little bit about some of the topics that we had today. We've got a great group from across the state here with us today. In the chat, everybody can participate there. Please put your name, your company, where you're from, so we get a little bit of an idea of who's with us today. All right, we're going to go ahead and jump right in to our keynote with Jay Byers. He's currently the president at Simpson College. Jay's going to be participating on the panel in a little bit as well, but I wanted him to kick us off today for a couple of reasons. First, education is one of the most important infrastructure things that we have here as a state. It's a key economic development tool for the state. And of course, that conversation of education umbrellas across all the topics. We've talked about people and culture. We've talked about business opportunities. Education is a key component of all of those. And of course, we wanted to talk about that a little bit more closely today. And second, Jay also has a unique perspective, having served as the CEO of the Greater Des Moines Partnership, where economic development was, of course, a key part of his role. And now being immersed in the education industry, that unique perspective is something we wanted to explore a little bit today and see maybe where he sees some opportunities for education and business to be working together more closely in the future and using education as a tool for the state. So Jay, welcome.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate the opportunity. Looking forward to the conversation.
All right. Well, what I wanted to start off today is just to get your thoughts a little bit about on how education should be viewed as an economic development tool and how you're viewing it now that you've been in your role here about a year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important, when I look back at my, 18 years at the Greater Des Moines Partnership, kind of regardless of the economic cycle, the number one issue we would hear from our members, whether it's public, private, or nonprofit, was talent. right? And so is there enough talent, and do they have the skills needed to be able to be successful as employers in our region? And so, the education infrastructure is really important to that, all the way from pre-K through lifelong learning, right? So it's important that we have great preschool options. It's important that we've got a great K through 12 system. It's important that we have strong community colleges, strong four-year colleges, and what we're doing with the apprenticeships as well. And then also just making sure that our current workforce is committed to lifelong learning, because again, it's the speed of innovation is happening so fast that everybody needs to be up, continue to stay up to speed on their skill sets. And so again, I think that everybody plays an important role, and of course at Simpson College, that on that bachelor level education, I think is more important than ever. And I think in some ways, the traditional higher education community has been somewhat of a punching bag for the last couple of years. I think just in terms of do you really need a four-year education, I really need a BA and so forth. But really, the research shows that it's more important than ever. If you look in terms of whether or not you have a BA or not, in terms of that spread, in terms of how much you're likely to make over the course of your lifetime, in fact, that spread is not getting smaller; it's getting bigger. And also just in terms of four-year education, in terms of those soft skills, power skills, life skills, whatever you want to call them, in terms of project management and communication, and all those other important skills that I think that schools like the Drakes, like the Simpsons, like the Grandviews do a really good job of that. And those are skills that transcend multiple careers, or multiple jobs over multiple careers over a lifetime. So again, I think that we play an important role, but as do the community colleges, as do the apprenticeships. I think it's all important that we continue to all do our part to skill up the workforce here in Central Iowa.
Well, I know you mentioned about education being a little bit of a punching bag of late, and I think one of the questions I have for you is, what are some of the challenges right now that you're seeing in helping ensure that we've got a robust education system here?
Well, I think it's really important, and again, I think that it all plays together. So again, whether it's pre-K, the K through 12, and the higher education system as well too. And I think it's important for us in the industry for higher education to make sure that we're providing affordable and accessible education. I think that we've demonstrated that commitment at Simpson, and as have others. But again, I think it's important that we talk about what is that value, and that it is still more important than ever. Again, I think that the power skills, the soft skills, the life skills, that are more important than ever, and that these are skills that transcend multiple jobs, multiple careers, and again, with the speed of innovation and all the things that are happening out there, I think that education is more important than ever.
When you're thinking about some of for Simpson as a private school, what are some of the challenges that you all are facing that you're trying to navigate through?
Yeah, well, I think that overall there's a couple of cliffs that are out there, right? There's there's just fewer college age students. During the Great Recession, people are having fewer kids, and then there's also the cliff of those students who no longer think that they need to go to college. And again, I think that those are both facing our industry. And but again, I think that like a place like Simpson, we just despite those trends, we this year had the largest first year class that we've had in more than a decade, and both with first year students, and then a large number of transfers as well too. So I think it's all about, how do you sort of package your product? How do you show that it's affordable and accessible? Then how do you show that value, right? I think it's like anything else. You got to show that value. You got to show the value to the students and to the parents as well.
Outside of your leadership, of course, what are some of the factors that played into the enrollment change for Simpson?
Well, I think there's a number of different things. We've made a lot of key investments in the campus. We've got, we updated our largest dorm. We've put significant investments into athletic facilities. We renovated our library, which is also the headquarters for our education department as well too. We've had some very aggressive recruitment strategies. Our All In for Iowa, which includes our 100K promise. So any Iowa-based student whose gross family income is 100,000 or less, and they meet our entrance requirements, can qualify for free tuition. At Simpson, we also have what's called the full 99. So we're offering one full scholarship regardless of income, across the entire state for all 99 counties. And then this year we just rolled out a new aggressive scholarship program that just we rolled out last week for any students who go to Des Moines Public or Indianola Public that have a 3.5 and above, and if they live on campus, would qualify for free tuition as well. So we've been really aggressive with that. It's been effective. We also recently, in the last couple of years, have launched 4 new sports: so men's and women's gymnastics, women's wrestling, and men's volleyball, and those have been very successful for us in our recruiting as well too. But just we've got a lot of great professors and staff here that are really sort of leaning into the future. We're working on a new strategic plan just to really sort of redefine what we think higher education needs to look like for a place like Simpson.
When you think about your role that you had in the business community and the intersection with education, you've now been in education for just over a year. What maybe have you learned or wish that you would have known while leading the partnership that you think could have been effective for the business community to be aware of?
Well, I think it's really important that it's a symbiotic relationship, that we work really closely together. I think that what role can like the Simpsons and the other higher education institutions play in partnering with current employers as well in terms of skilling up existing workforce, whether that's traditional degree programs, but also certificates and credentials. And I think that there's just a lot of great opportunities for symbiotic relationships. I think also too, just in terms of places like Simpson and the other institutions, we're very much a talent magnet for the region. So in terms of strengthening those relationships with the individual employers in the private sector and public and nonprofit sector, just in terms of internships, in terms of full-time employees. About 75% of our students come from Iowa, but 80% stay. So we're a net importer of talent, and as are most of the private colleges in Iowa as well. And so I think that's important for us as we haven't been a rapidly growing state, but the colleges and universities have been a big part of that in terms of recruiting talent. So I think just in terms of filling specific talent needs, and then I think also just that communication between employers and the education sector in terms of what are those skills that we're really looking for, what are those life skills that are important, what can we do better at a place like Simpson in terms of preparing that future workforce, what are those key skills that our employers are looking for, and then how can we do better with that direct communication and advisory committees, and to making sure that we're creating students and future employees that are going to help them to be more successful moving forward.
You mentioned the net importer component of things. I wonder, are there thoughts, ideas that you might have around ways that it would make it easier for the colleges to do more of that, of importing folks from around the country or external also?
Yeah, well, I think just core economic development, community development strategies are important, right? Because people are not only choosing to come to a Simpson or another college, but they're also choosing to come to Indianola, coming to Central Iowa, and I think our location as part of the Des Moines Metro is critically important to our success in the past and in the future, right? Because this is, for us, it's really sort of the best of both worlds, because you can offer the opportunity for students to be part of a larger, really rapidly growing metro. Using my stats from my previous job, the fastest growing major metro in terms of population, GDP, and job growth over the past decade plus in the Midwest. And that's a great selling point for us. So there's a lot of things to do and a lot of great job opportunities for if people want to stay here. But at the same time, we're in Indianola, which is small county seat, safe community. So they can have the sort of best of both worlds from the parents, know that their students can come here, be safe, have a great experience, but have large city experiences, global experiences here in Central Iowa. So I think that the better that the region does, that the better it helps, the more it helps places like Simpson in our ability to attract not only students but to attract faculty and staff, because this is a robust region, and I think it's a big advantage for us. And I think that the more successful the region is, the more successful we're going to be, and vice versa.
Well, last question I have then for you today is just,
Sure.
there's likely a variety of opportunities, and so I'm just curious what maybe you're seeing through your role here now after being there for about a year, that there might be for colleges to better work with businesses in the future.
Well, I think that lifelong learning component is really important, and for the more we can work together, that just completing a degree, whether it's an AA or a BA or a doctorate, right? I mean, your education should continue to go on for the rest of your career, and how can we continue to work together to deliver those educational opportunities? Because again, when you're thinking about, for example, AI, right? There's lots of discussions on AI. And I like to say, look, AI is not going to take your job, but someone who knows how to run AI better than you might take your job, right? So I think that that's just one example of the many technologies out there that we shouldn't be afraid of, but that we should embrace. And it's no different than when Westlaw and Lexis came into the legal world, or Google came into, or Wikipedia came into the world, right? There's just all these new tools, and how can we take advantage of those and leverage those? Because again, I think that's just part of the evolution of innovation and technology, and how can we be on the leading edge of that and not be scared of that, but embrace it.
Well, Jay, appreciate your time with us for the keynote component of things today. Jay's going to join us for the panel as well this afternoon. And so just want to say thank you and congrats on being over a year now. And I know you're well into your second year. So
appreciate the opportunity, Chris.
Awesome. All right. We want to give you a little bit of a sneak peek at some of the sentiment data from our economic outlook sentiment survey that Baton Global team is putting together, that we're going to unveil at the October 22nd event. With us today, I'm delighted to introduce Wade Britt. He's the partner and managing director at Baton Global, which is a leading strategy and research consulting firm that has international presences and offices, but it's based right here in Des Moines. This is the third year we've done the survey with Baton, and the survey aims to help provide data and trends to leaders to help them understand what other leaders are thinking, where the opportunities and gaps are in terms of economic outlook in the state now into the future. They're currently crunching through that data so that we can unveil it here in a couple of weeks. Wade, I'm going to turn it over to you so you can lead us through a little bit of what we found in the infrastructure portion of the survey.
Absolutely. Really glad to be here, Chris, and thanks for the partnership that we've had over the last few years pulling this data together. What I'm actually going to do in support of the discussions that we'll be having later, I just want to orient you to the data we have on infrastructure. I hope that you are able to see a lot of different bar charts here. Can I maybe get a thumbs up from somebody out there just to make sure you're seeing everything okay? Perfect. Thank you very much. So the results are being presented. These are the 2024 results. Now, what's a little unusual about the way that we collect this data, we ask people about different time periods going into the future so we can try to get a handle on how people's perceptions of the future are impacted by a shorter or a longer term view. We did that same methodology last year in 2023. So you're seeing people's outlook for different years. This year's data for 2026, 2028, and 2030 prognostication on all forms of infrastructure. And I wanted to start with this overall view because when you look at this, we can see two trends that we kind of saw across all of the three components of this study. Previous years had a much higher neutral rating. People were kind of fence sitting. They weren't really sure which way things were going to break. This year's study, we really saw a lot of that neutrality break. It did tend to break more pessimistic than optimistic. But when you look at the overall infrastructure values, this looks kind of like a normal distribution. Another thing that we see at this aggregate level that has been kind of interesting is that our rural respondents tend to be on almost all measures across the entire study more optimistic than their urban counterparts. So those were two findings in the data that relate to the whole study. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to break more into the individual parts of infrastructure. And I'm going to do this kind of rapidly. But what you can see is when we look at communications infrastructure, what you're seeing here is very high levels of optimism and even a lot of this most optimistic category. When we go over and look at energy, it's a similar picture, maybe not as optimistic as communications hard infrastructure, but still a lot of positivity, a lot of optimism around our energy infrastructure. And then transportation lags a little behind communication and energy, and still a pretty optimistic picture looking out into the future. I'm kind of calling this the tale of two infrastructures, because although the business leaders had a lot of optimistic sentiment on physical infrastructure, when we went into social infrastructure, we saw some different stories emerge. And here I will focus in on, let's see, yes. Focusing in on the education subcomponent of social infrastructure, we saw a lot of this neutrality in the previous year break really pessimistically across the timeline of the horizon that we had asked our respondents on. The next sort of area of focus, according to the respondents, is health, which also a lot of that neutrality breaking into a more pessimistic category. Childcare, continuing the trend, although less pessimistic than the other two components of social infrastructure. And lastly, housing, still a story of increased pessimism, but by far out of this category, perhaps the area that our leaders express the most positive sentiment around. I hope being oriented to that data was a little bit useful. I hope we were able to get that information out to you in a digestible way, even though I'm kind of racing through it. Chris, I will turn it back over to you to facilitate us through our focus groups.